Hey there everybody, today I'm here to show you a really cool technique called floating. Floating is a type of blending where it's almost like the color is floating across the surface of what you're painting. And it's really, really neat. And once you get the hang of it, the possibilities are absolutely endless. So what we're going to do today is show you how to float. And we're working with a water-based media, meaning we're working with water and we're working with watercolor. You could just as easily do this with acrylic, but today we're working with watercolor. I've got my Callia brushes with me. Callia is my brush line, one of my brush lines, and it's a synthetic brush that's made this style and shape. This is a 3/8 angle shader, is made with a really, really beautiful synthetic filament that soaks up water in a really gorgeous way and then releases it really, really evenly. So it's perfect for blending techniques in any media, in any medium, and it just does amazing, amazing things. So let's get started. You want a little piece of paper towel, and today we're floating on paper. You can do it on any surface that you want. I've got clean water. We dip the angle in the water and we blot on paper towel. Then we dip the toe, and the toe of the angle brush is the tip of the angle. And we walk it on our palette, and we walk it out and back in. And you can do both sides. And let's just show you what that looks like on here. So when we come to the surface, we have this beautiful gradation of color to nothing. So it's like we've already pre-blended the color in our brush before we ever get to the surface. And I'm gonna have to do it again because I've already run out of color. So I dip, blot, corner load the brush. Now, if you're working with watercolor, you have to make sure your watercolor is really, really nice and wet. And then we're gonna come right into the shadow area of what we're painting. Get up here. We're going to walk that color out really beautifully. And I often rinse the brush, blot, and I'll just gently blend a little bit. You don't have to do that where it meets. And what you can see there is that we've got a really beautiful gradation of dark color to nothing where it meets with the color beside it. Now the thing with floating is you can't go back over top of this area again to float above this vein line until this first layer is dry, or you would lift the color underneath it. And that doesn't matter if you're an acrylic or watercolor or oil or any medium, this has to be dry first. So basically the depth or how deep your float is going to depend on how much color you have in that brush before you begin. So I'm just going to tap this off a little bit. We're just going to show you just a wee bit. And you can also really angle that brush. So you can see how really pretty, and you can do some really cool stuff. So sometimes I'll bring it in and I'll get really nice striations just by angling that float inward. Running out of paint there. I'm going to stop there because I know this isn't fully dry. So really, really amazing technique once you've practiced it a little bit, and I do suggest you practice it a little bit with different colors. You don't just have to float your shadow. You could also 100% float highlights, float different colors, float anything. And the trick to floating is walking that color out. So I'm just going to show that one more time. I wanted to show the walking. So when I walk that color out, I know the light is glaring a little bit. I'm going to come over and back. And sometimes I'll do it on both sides, because if I flip my brush, so let's say I'm here, if I want to flip my brush and come over here, if I hadn't walked that color on both sides of the brush, then I would have a hard line on the other side. So you really have to walk the color out. And I move over and over and over so I don't run the whole brush through a section of paint over here. So floating is fun. We're going to let this dry for a second through the magic of internet TV, it will look to you like it's 2 seconds, but with watercolor, you really got to wait till things dry a little bit longer than we often think. So I'm going to let it dry for a few minutes, probably grab a cup of tea. We're going to float the top of the vein line and then come right back. Okay, for our final layer of floating, just to show you a bit of a trick for above the vein line. Once again, one of the reasons we love floating with an angle is because the toe of the brush keeps that nice, kind of tells us where that shadow is supposed to go. We're going to get a nice walk out here on each side of the brush. I like to angle it. Come in around that way. And if I need to soften it, I can rinse. I can also pull that out to give it a little bit of striation coming out from that side. And that gives us the shadow there. And we can keep playing and building layers and floating or doing washes. That's just to give you an idea of how you can build blending through blending by pre-blending on your brush before you even touch the surface, the watercolor surface or watercolor paper that you're working on. Now, if you're working on acrylic, you would just do the exact same thing with acrylic paint, and you want to make sure your paint is nice and wet, whether it's watercolor or acrylic. It has to be wet when you load it with the toe of the brush. So there's a little intro to floating, and I hope you have fun. And please, if you like this video, like and subscribe, and I hope you visit me on willowwolfe.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.